Hello and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to look at my team selection for game week 9, and first we'll have a quick look at how I got on in game week 8. Another pretty poor week. It's been a really bad start to the season, to be honest. As you can see, I'm ranked 2.1 million. To be honest, I've never had a good start to an FPL season. So even the year before last, when I finished 3k overall, I still had a pretty bad start to the season. Not sure why that is that I start badly, but it does mean that I can usually come back towards the end of the season. I'd like to have one season where that doesn't happen ideally, but I'm not too worried at the moment, although it would be good to start picking up some green arrows. I do still have my wildcard in hand. I haven't used any chips yet. But yeah, 5.1 million game week rank, 2.1 million overall rank, 37 points. So the moves that I did were Saka to Son and Havertz to Solanke. The Son one paid off. The Solanke one not so much, but I'm happy with him going forward. Starting at the back though, Dean Henderson. Like I always say in these videos, I don't expect any points from that position, from that goalkeeper position. I'm just glad I'm not spending more money on that position. I say every week, I'm glad I don't have Edison. I'm glad I don't have Raya. I'm glad I'm not spending more money for the same amount of points. Now, obviously, there is goalkeepers that are doing well. The likes of this week's Sells, for example. In fact, Sells in general, actually. And Verbruggen. They've both started the season very, very well. So there are definitely other keepers to be had, but I don't think it's ever worth, or not ever, I don't think it's, most of the time it's not worth using a transfer on that goalkeeper position when transfers are so precious and they can be used in much better positions. So forwards like premiums or premium mids, anything like that. I'd much rather use my transfers there than in the goalkeeper position. So Henderson is disappointing, but I won't be transferring him out. I'll be keeping him until our wild card, which is potentially game week 12, but we'll talk about that later in the video. Then the defence again was pretty disappointing, really. Had quite good fixtures for all of them. So Gabriel with Bournemouth away. Obviously the red card to Saliba pretty much killed that game for most Arsenal assets. I wasn't expecting loads in that game, if I'm honest, but over the last 3 weeks where they've had Southampton at home, Leicester at home, Bournemouth away, to have got pretty much no points from that Arsenal defender slot is annoying. Although I am glad that I didn't have double defence. A lot of people went for Gabriel and Saliba. So I'm glad I went for Havertz and Saka rather than Saka and Saliba. But still disappointing. Pedro Porro, again, he seems to be taking up a slightly different role at the moment, but where he's not quite as attacking as he was at the start of the season, but I'm still fine with keeping him. They've got good fixtures. I was expecting a little bit more this week maybe, but he did look quite good in the first half attacking wise, but no points. And then Rico Lewis, City just seem to find a way to concede every week, and it's kind of annoying, but again, there are people with double defence, although if you've got double defence, you've probably got Vardiol, who obviously scored. But Rico Lewis looked dangerous going forward, so kind of fine. And Cole Walker seems to have picked up some sort of injury over the international break, so I'll be keeping Lewis. Obviously, brought Son in. My thinking with that was that Saka's 4 fixtures from game week 8 to game week 11 aren't great, and I'll probably be wildcarding in game week 12, so it wasn't like I needed to keep Saka for game week 12 onwards, because I can bring him in on wildcard if I plan to wildcard then, which at the moment I'm penciling it in. And Son's fixtures are just brilliant. Like the Spurs attack before game week 8, they had the highest XG of the season so far. I think they're now behind Liverpool for that, but they're just one of the best attacks in the league this season. So with these good fixtures, I'm glad that I've got Son. I'm glad I've got Solanke. Bruno Fernandes finally got a return. I just think he's a good pick, and I've said this every week. He's been disappointing, similar to Eze, who we'll get onto, but I just think he's a good pick. He's got everything we want from an FPL asset. He's got penalties, he's got good minutes. Granted, he plays for quite a terrible team, but I'll be keeping him. He's got good fixtures coming up. So, yeah, there's no chance that I'll be selling him. 5 points isn't obviously a lot, but I do think he'll just tick along. For his price, he's probably not worth it, but I don't think he's worth a transfer out with the fixtures he's got. Morgan Rogers continues to just get points at his price. Cannot argue with what he's doing, so he's brilliant. Not much needs to be said there. Eze is clearly disappointing. Very, very disappointing and very frustrating to own. His underlying numbers are pretty good, which makes it even more frustrating. He's had 5 or 6 big chances this season. He's had like the 3rd most shots in the league, but he's just not getting the goals or assists. So, unfortunately, with my plan and my transfers planned, I don't really have a way to sell him at the moment. So I think I'm just gonna have to keep him and hope that Palace sort something out, because Palace look awful right now. I'm not sure how it happened really. I mean, at the end of last season, they looked incredible. I know they've lost Elise, but Elise was injured for quite a long time last season anyway, so I didn't really think that would have as big an effect as it has had. Palace have just been bad, but I'm going to have to keep Eze for now. I'll talk about my plans as to why I can't sell him in the next part. And Bomo didn't get a return this week, but I'm not too worried about that. He's got great fixtures going forward. Ipswich at home this week is a fantastic fixture. As I mentioned in my video earlier in the week, the captaincy video, he is right up there for captaincy. Obviously, if you've got Haaland, then you're not going to captain Bomo, but he is right up there in the captaincy conversation. Then I had Haaland captain, who was very disappointing. It was more disappointing that he actually barely had any chances, to be honest. However, that is not going to stop me from captaining him this week. And then Solanke was very frustrating. He kind of played quite deep, which was the more frustrating thing. It wasn't that he didn't return, it was that he didn't really get any chances. Similar to Haaland, no, not really any chances, and he never really looked like scoring, to be honest. But the bench scored pretty much no points apart from Dunk, who was last on the bench. But let's move on to how my team looks for Gameweek 9 now. Okay, so starting off in goal, obviously got Valdemar on the bench, who won't play, and I've got Dean Henderson in goal. Not the best fixture, Tottenham at home, because Spurs attack is good right now. But as I always say, I'm not using a transfer on that position. So let's move on to the defenders. I've got Pedro Porro, Crystal Palace away. I've got a lot of players in this fixture, which isn't ideal. I think 5 of my 11 players, so almost half of my players are playing in that one fixture, which I don't really like. Although, if there was a team at the moment that I wanted that to happen, it would probably be Spurs, given that they're great going forward, but they're pretty poor at the back. So all 4 of the outfield players I've got in this game have quite a good chance of returning. So fine with that. Rico Lewis, this is a fantastic fixture. Obviously Southampton at home. Cole Walker appears to have a bit of an injury that he picked up in the international break. So there is less chance of rotation. I'm not sure that there's no chance of rotation, because there never is with Man City. But I'll be keeping him. I've got Gabriel first on the bench, or I might even put Konza as, well, second on the bench, but the first defender on the bench. I may swap that to Konza, but either way, I've got a fairly good option on the bench if Rico Lewis does miss out. And then Lewis Dunk with Wolves at home. I'm not that big on the Brighton defence, to be honest. I know they kept a clean sheet in game week 8, but I'm not huge on their defence really. Although with the new bonus point system, Dunk does have other routes to points, less so when they don't keep a clean sheet, but I still think he's quite a good pick really. So fine with my defence this week. Let's move on to the midfield. Okay, right, midfielders. So Heung-min Son, Crystal Palace away. As I mentioned, I've got quite a few players in that fixture. As you would have just seen, I have Pedro Porro, I have Dean Henderson, I have Son, I have Eze, and then, as you will see, I've got Solanke. But Crystal Palace defence hasn't been great. Crystal Palace in general haven't been great, so I think that's a pretty good fixture for Son. Happy with that. I don't know if the vice captaincy will actually be on him. Probably won't matter, but I'll probably put it on Bomo. Anyway, Bruno Fernandes, West Ham away. The fact that it's away is obviously slightly worse, but the West Ham defence is a shambles right now. So it would be classic Man United to turn up at West Ham and not get a result. But this is the perfect time to play West Ham. So I am confident in owning Bruno Fernandes this week. Morgan Rogers has Bournemouth at home. Not the best fixture, not the worst fixture. Bournemouth defence is actually okay, to be fair. But the Villa attack is also very good. There's obviously a slight chance that his minutes might be managed around these Champions League games, but I don't think that's a good enough reason to bench him, given that my 8th attacker, as you will see, is unavailable. So, yeah, I'm fine with playing Rodgers. He's just great at his price. Eze, I don't like the fact that Eze is in my team. Obviously, he is not doing well at all right now, and it is in that fixture with Tottenham. But I've got to just hold him and hope the fixture after this week is okay. So if I can get through this week with one attack in return, I'll be buzzing from Eze. And then Mboma has Ipswich at home. Plum fixture, absolutely fantastic fixture. If Haaland wasn't playing Southampton at home, there would be a very strong case to put the captain's armband on Mboma. Either way, I'm happy to own him. If you don't, get him in your team. And onto the forwards, I obviously have Erling Haaland as my captain. That will not be changing. Then I have Dominic Solanke, Crystal Palace away, as I previously mentioned. On the bench, I have João Pedro with Wolves at home. If he were fit, I would be playing him this week. Don't actually know who I'd bench if he were fit, but don't need to make that decision because João Pedro is injured. So that's my team for this week as it stands. As you can see, I have one free transfer, 0.8 million in the bank. Now, my current plan is to not use that transfer and to roll. And the reason for that is because next week, game week 10, I'm looking to make a big switch. Now, as I mentioned previously, I am wildcarding in game week 12, potentially, most likely wildcarding in game week 12 or 13, around that time anyway. So I don't really need to worry about how I get Palmer in. I don't really need to worry about how I get Saka back because I can get them both back on wildcard. The current player that I don't have that I will want for 10 and 11 is Mo Salah. Now, because I've got a wildcard in hand and I'm planning to use it quite soon, I'm kind of happy to take a bit more risk within the game weeks 10 and 11 because if I make big moves, I can kind of rectify them if I do something wrong. So my current plan in game week 10, loose plan, I'm not set on this, but loose plan is to sell Erling Haaland down to a cheaper striker. Not sure who that will be yet. It could be Cunha is my current thoughts, just because I technically only need that striker for 2 weeks. I mean, there is a chance where I keep that striker for longer, but I'll be on wildcard probably, so it doesn't really matter long-term wise. I just need someone who's good for game week 10, game week 11. Cunha is that. Other options like Raul Jimenez, I could even go a little bit more expensive, but Cunha's kind of top of the list at the moment. We'll see how that goes as game week 9 progresses. And then I will need to move a midfielder on to Mohamed Salah. Again, I have no idea who that midfielder will be yet. I think I can afford to do Rodgers if that's where I want to go with it. Given that Aston Villa's fixtures are pretty poor for game weeks 10 and 11, I believe. I don't think they're good fixtures at all. So it might be the play that I go from Rodgers to Salah and then Haaland down to someone cheap. The only other kind of forwards that are more expensive that I could potentially want would be Watkins, but as I just mentioned, Villa's fixtures aren't great for 10-11, so wouldn't want him. Havertz, who, again, Arsenal's fixtures, aren't the best in game weeks 10-11, so I probably wouldn't want him. So I'd probably be going down to quite a cheap striker anyway. So it probably will be Havertz that makes way. It probably will be Rodgers that makes way for Salah, but that is not a decision that I need to make this week. We'll talk about that in next week's team selection video. There is a very strong chance that this is how my team will look come the deadline. I'm very unlikely to make any moves as I need 2 free transfers next week. So If you've got any questions on your team or my team, if you've got any questions on anything FPL related, drop them in the comments to this video. If you did like this one, then make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.